Pam stood up slowly. The room fell silent. Judge Beckman had just cut her off for the third time. His words had been cold, sharp, final. But she didn't back down. In that packed courtroom, full of lawyers, reporters, and law students, only one person refused to look away. Pam Bondi. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady. "If justice can be decided based on personal opinion, then what do we have left?" A heavy silence took hold of the room. Even Judge Beckman seemed momentarily thrown off. His fingers tapped the bench. His eyes searched for a way out that wasn't there. He tried to shut the case down fast. But now Pam was the one in control. And no one had any idea what was coming next. Before we find out how we got here, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how far this community reaches. And if you enjoy stories like this, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It takes just a second for you, and it means everything to us. Now, sit back and enjoy the story. 3 hours earlier. Fulton County Courthouse, Atlanta. Pam Bondi had arrived on time. Dark gray suit, steady stride, every document in order. That morning, she was set to represent a small family-owned business in what should have been a minor administrative hearing. At least, on paper. The session was scheduled in Courtroom 4B, one she'd stood in before, and walked out of victorious more than once. She wasn't nervous. She never was. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt something off. Judge Harold Beckman was already seated. He wasn't reviewing files. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just sitting there, still, silent, watching. His eyes locked onto Pam for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then drifted back into the void. She took her place at the defense table. Across the room, a young municipal attorney shuffled papers with shaking hands. He looked more anxious than the case warranted. Pam noticed. When Judge Beckman brought down the gavel, he skipped the usual formalities. No introductions. No summary. "The court has reviewed the documents," he said, "and finds that the violation of the city ordinance is confirmed. A fine of $90,000 is hereby imposed, effective immediately. No arguments. No cross-examination. Just a verdict." Pam didn't flinch. But inside, she already knew. This wouldn't be just another hearing. Pam didn't move. Not out of hesitation, but out of principle. The ruling had just been delivered, and not a single word had been spoken in the courtroom. No evidence had been reviewed. No questions asked. No defense heard. Just a number, $90,000. And a commanding voice that dropped it like it was final, unquestionable. Pam turned slightly toward her client. A middle-aged man, small business owner, visibly confused. He wasn't sure if the hearing had just ended or if there'd been some procedural mistake. Pam knew exactly what had happened. And she had no intention of letting it slide. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the defense hasn't yet had the opportunity to present its position." Judge Beckman barely lifted his eyes. "The violation is clear. The ordinance speaks for itself. There's nothing to discuss." Pam paused, keeping her voice even. "With all due respect, Your Honor, skipping the hearing phase goes against every principle of due process." Beckman leaned forward, visibly irritated. "Ms. Bondi, this courtroom is not a stage for your lectures on the law. If you insist on wasting the court's time with unnecessary objections, we'll move straight to execution." Someone in the back coughed. Another whispered under their breath. The atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just about regulations anymore. It had become a challenge. And Pam, like always, was more than ready to meet it. Pam wasn't new to strict judges. She'd stood in tougher courtrooms than this one. But something about Judge Beckman's behavior didn't sit right. It wasn't just discipline. It was haste. A suspicious urgency, like he wanted the case closed before it ever began. She slowly ran her fingers over the file in front of her, then looked up. "Your Honor, my objection isn't about the fine itself, but the procedure by which it was imposed. No evidence has been presented. No documents. No testimony. No objective verification. Beckman exhaled loudly, clearly annoyed. The city's office verified the violation. That's enough. Pam nodded slowly, as if that reply confirmed exactly what she suspected. Then she rose to her feet. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't change her tone. But the silence that followed made everyone listen. "It's not enough," she said. "Not when a citizen is being charged $90,000 without even being told what happened. The law demands transparency. Evidence. The right to respond. And so far, none of that has happened here." Across the courtroom, the municipal attorney sat still, watching her. He looked almost relieved, like someone had finally said what he didn't dare say himself. Pam turned back to the judge. "If this hearing is just a formality, say so. But if this is still a courtroom, then the defense has a right to be heard." For a long second, even Beckman said nothing. But his eyes said plenty. Pam had just lit a fuse. And from that moment on, nothing would unfold as planned. Pam sat back down. She slowly opened the folder in front of her and slid out a single page. Every movement was deliberate, intentional. She knew all eyes were on her. And she knew how to use silence. "Your Honor," she said, calm and composed. "Before the court moves to any final decision, I believe it's appropriate to reference a clear legal precedent." Judge Beckman leaned back in his chair, visibly impatient. "Ms. Bondi, if your goal is to stall, I'll remind you I've got a full docket today." Pam didn't flinch. "I'm not stalling. I'm upholding the law." She held up the page. "Reynolds versus City of Clearwater, Court of Appeals, 2018. Same type of administrative fine. Same statute cited. The judge dismissed the fine due to lack of evidence and violation of the defendant's right to due process." A quiet stir moved through the courtroom. Pam continued. "In that ruling, it was clearly stated the penalty imposed without proper investigation is incompatible with the principles of fairness and with the U.S. Constitution." Beckman pressed his lips together. "That case doesn't apply here. Every situation is different." Pam nodded. "True. But the law is the same. And if we allow it to be bypassed today, what rule gets ignored next?" The courtroom went silent again. The audience, who had seemed distracted earlier, was now hanging on every word. Pam wasn't just defending a client anymore. She was challenging the very way that courtroom was being run. And the more she spoke, the clearer it became. She had no intention of backing down. After a long pause, Judge Beckman struck his gavel. "This court will take a 15-minute recess." Pam didn't react. She simply watched him leave the bench, his steps stiff, his gaze avoiding the room. This wasn't a break. It was a strategic retreat. The courtroom buzzed. Some scribbled notes. Others pulled out their phones, searching for the Reynolds case online. The air had grown heavier. Pam remained seated, hands folded on the table. She waited. When the session resumed, something was different. Beckman wasn't alone. Seated beside him, dressed in a dark robe, was Judge Mildred Hayes. A well-known name. President of the State Administrative Court. Respected. Feared. The room fell instantly quiet. Beckman spoke, his tone more controlled this time. "In light of the complexity of the arguments raised by the defense, I've requested the presence of Judge Hayes as an observer for the remainder of this hearing." Pam lifted her gaze slightly. She didn't say a word. But she understood. They hadn't brought her in. Judge Hayes spoke, her tone calm but authoritative. "Ms. Bondi, you claim that this fine was issued without any factual basis. Do you have evidence to support that claim?" Pam nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. But before we go any further, I believe it would be helpful to hear from the individual who actually issued the citation." Beckman stiffened. Then, reluctantly, he gestured to the back of the courtroom. From the third row, a man in a grey uniform stood. Rigid posture. Confident gaze. Kevin Monroe, municipal inspector. He took the stand and was sworn in. Pam rose. "Mr. Monroe, can you confirm that you were the one who filed the report that led to the fine in question?" "Yes, I can." "Can you explain the basis on which you determined the alleged violation?" He cleared his throat. "During my inspection, I noted a structural irregularity at the building's secondary entrance. It did not meet the municipal safety code requirements." Pam gave a slight nod. "Did you take photographic evidence?" "No." "Did you draft a detailed technical report?" "Just the citation." "Did you speak to any witnesses?" "Employees, residents, anyone who could confirm or challenge what you observed?" "No." "It wasn't necessary. The violation was obvious." Pam stepped closer to the witness box. "No documentation. No photos. No concrete proof. Just your word." Monroe looked a little less confident now. "I've got years of experience. I know a violation when I see one." Pam nodded again. "I don't question your experience, Mr. Monroe. But experience isn't evidence." Then she turned to Judge Hayes. "Your Honor, this case rests entirely on an unverified statement. And the rule of law requires much more than that." The courtroom was still. Even Beckman said nothing. Pam had just pulled the floor out from under the prosecution. And she had done it with 3 simple questions. Pam returned to her place. But she didn't sit down. She turned to the bench, her voice clear and unwavering. "Your Honors, if we allow a fine to be upheld without a single piece of evidence, then tomorrow anyone could be punished based on suspicion, on a feeling, on someone's personal judgment." She paused. Then continued. "If the word of a single official is enough, no documents, no photos, no chance to respond, then the presumption of innocence no longer exists." Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't shouting. But every word hit like a hammer. "My client was fined for a violation no one has proven. Today it's him. Tomorrow it could be anyone. And if this court confirms a ruling with no foundation, it sends a dangerous message. Not just to this room, but to the entire system." She placed her hand slowly on the table. Then delivered the final line. "If this fine stands, I'll file an immediate appeal. And I'll take it to the national press. Because this isn't just about a fine. It's about how power is used. Or misused." For a moment, no one spoke. Even Judge Beckman seemed unsure where to look. Pam didn't need to raise her voice. Her strength was in the precision. And in that moment, every word had landed exactly where it needed to. Judge Hayes sat in silence for a few seconds. She flipped slowly through the pages of the file. Then she turned to Inspector Monroe. "You confirmed that you collected no concrete evidence to support the alleged violation?" "Yes, Your Honor." Hayes nodded, then glanced toward Beckman, who avoided her gaze. "In the absence of objective and verifiable elements, and with no documentation to support the fine, this court finds no legal grounds for its enforcement. The sanction is therefore nullified." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Pam didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply gave a small nod, as if to say, "This is how it should be." Judge Beckman struck the gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." He stood quickly, avoiding eye contact, and left the courtroom with stiff steps. Hayes remained for a moment longer. She locked eyes with Pam. Said nothing. But the silence spoke volumes. Pam gathered her papers, calmly put them in order, and walked. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the air felt different. No longer tense, just still. Pam walked with a calm, steady pace. People watched her. No one spoke. But in their eyes there was respect. Then a voice behind her. "Ms. Bondi." She turned. It was Judge Hayes. She approached with a serious, but not unfriendly expression. "You weren't here just to observe, were you?" Pam asked. Hayes gave a faint smile. "No. But now everyone's seen who really led that hearing." Pam nodded. "I hope it makes them think." Hayes took a deeper breath, then lowered her voice slightly. Years ago, I lost a case just like this. I trusted the process, not the facts. I've never forgotten that lesson. Today, I wanted to make sure it wasn't repeated. Pam looked at her in silence. And for the first time since she'd entered that courtroom, her face seemed a little less tense. There was a trace of understanding. Maybe even gratitude. Hayes gave her a small nod and turned back toward the courtroom. Pam headed for the exit. But just before reaching the door, a man stepped in front of her. Microphone in hand, press badge visible. The camera was already rolling. Ms. Bondi, one question. Do you believe Judge Beckman will retaliate? Is he likely to come after you? Pam looked at him for a moment. Then smiled. A small, measured smile. Wouldn't be the first time. And she walked out. No applause. No grand victory. Just the quiet knowledge that something important had been put back in its place. The right to be heard. The duty of those who judge to do so fairly. And the courage to say, when it matters most, no, this isn't right. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed an injustice? Have you seen someone forced to defend themselves against something they didn't even get to contest? If so, tell us in the comments. Your stories bring this community to life more than you know. If this video moved you, leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to stay with us for more stories that make you think, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. Your time matters. And if today we filled it with something that made you reflect, then it was time well spent. Remember, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to know where the truth is. And have the courage to stand for it.